I'm so excited to make today's video. I've wanted to make this for years. Today, we're going to compare a $50 grinder, a $500 grinder, with a $500,000 coffee grinder. Let me explain what's going on. I am here at Cometeer in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And if you don't know Cometeer, they buy delicious coffee, they extract it, they flash freeze it, and you, when you want to drink it, melt it back into hot water or even cold water if you want to, and drink and enjoy. Now, when I was here, I did ask if I could indulge in making a video I've wanted to make for literally years. I wanted to play with the fanciest of fancy coffee grinders, and they very kindly said yes, with a few caveats. Now, a couple of important disclosures. I'm here for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I'm here to taste some of the extractions, some of the capsules they've made of Square Miles coffee. And secondly, I do have an ongoing relationship with Cometeer. So watching this, you should absolutely treat this video like an ad. I might have told you a little bit of a lie earlier on. I said what I showed you was a $500,000 grinder. It sort of is and it isn't. I showed you the bit that you load the coffee beans into. The grinder itself was out of shot. And as accommodating as Cometeer have been, they did have one hard line. I can't go into the secret room where they grind and extract coffee because they're doing some proprietary stuff in there and we can't film that. But otherwise, we can have some fun still. So here's the lineup. We've got a $50 grinder, we've got a $500 grinder, and we've got a $500,000 grinder. And we're going to do some tests. And we're going to start with some taste tests. I'm going to brew coffee. I'm going to brew just a pour over, 30 to 500 of each of the three, and just have a taste and see what's going on. But let's look a little bit more at our contenders today. $50 for the Spoli, I think. It says it's a conical burr grinder. You've got your grind adjustment at the front here. We have already kind of matched the grind settings across all three grinders. This is at nearly its finest setting, which is kind of interesting. Now next to it is a grinder I'm pretty excited to test. It's the new Baratza Vario Plus. It's about $500. It's not on general sale yet, and I'm grateful to Baratza for agreeing to sell me one of these a little bit early. Interestingly, to me, to match the grinds between the two, we're at a very coarse setting on this grinder because it's espresso capable. This, despite saying it can do extra fine, for $50, no, I don't think it can. So before we go too much further, I do need to very quickly explain the differences between the burr sets of the three grinders because they're all different. The cheapest one has a conical shaped burr set. The central burr is a kind of cone shape, which gives you a lot of cutting surface for relatively low RPMs. And it's very common in cheaper grinders to have conical burr sets because that way they can kick out a lot of ground coffee without having a powerful motor. A lot of people prefer flat burr sets. These have two flat discs that spin against each other with cutting teeth, and these are, for many people, preferable to conical burr sets in lots of environments for having a sort of more uniform particle size distribution. But the big, fancy, expensive grinder doesn't work like either of these. Instead, it has roller mills. Now, these are kind of long, cylindrical sort of burrs, essentially, and you have two per set that roll in towards each other, and the beans are fed between the middle. And you have multiple stages of these rollers, and you can control each one. So you have really high throughput and a ton of control over how you grind the coffee. So what I'll do first is I'm going to grind 30 grams of coffee in each one, and we'll have a listen, see how it goes, and make a V60. That's pretty quiet. That smells like burning motor. You could really smell the motor struggling with that coffee, and that was not a good smell or a reassuring smell, if I'm honest. The Baratza. Just looking at these, you can see a difference. Notable to me, it felt like the Baratza was a little bit slower, but we are going to do some speed tests later, which will be kind of fun. So I'll get the coffee now from the big fancy grinder and we'll start making some pour-overs. So we brewed 3 V60s, 30 grams in, 500 grams of water. Here is the Spoli, this is the Baratza, and this is the Cometeer fancy grinder. It's not a blind tasting today because it's going to be, well, I think pretty obvious between them. And so I just want to taste the difference and talk about the kind of flavors involved. So as we taste this one here, it's just rough. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just harsh, it's bitter, it's astringent, it's mean. There's not much sweetness at all. It's not a great cup of coffee at all. In the middle, the big thing that you notice is this improvement in sweetness and this decrease in bitterness. It's definitely a significantly better tasting cup of coffee. Like there's a big leap there in quality. It's a night and day difference. Now, when you get to the third bowl, it feels definitely like there's a little drop in extraction. It feels lighter, but it feels very sweet. It feels very clean, very kind of, it doesn't leave any unpleasant finish in there. It's just sweet and gentle. I would want, in a way, this, but a little bit finer to just pull the extraction up a little bit more. But you would guess then that the grind distribution on this isn't very good because it tastes like it's muddy and it's harsh, which probably means fines. This tastes much better. And this just tastes very clean, very sweet. There's probably a big variance in the distribution of grinds. Now, the fun thing about being here is that I don't have to just speculate, right? This is a very subjective experience. And I could tell you anything and you can't really know, but I can show you something objective. Because not only do they have a very fancy grinder here, they've got something I really want, a laser particle size analyzer. You put ground coffee in, it uses lasers to analyze the distribution of particles, how many pieces are this big, that big, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go and look at these with Alex Kaplan. He's Cometeer's head of coffee product, and he's going to talk me through what the analysis of these grinders looks like. What are we seeing here? Just talk me through the chart.
So this first graph we're looking at is the volume density chart as a percentage of the overall grounds for the 3 different grinders. The red line here is the $50 grinder, the green line is the $500 grinder, and the blue line is Cometeer's $500,000 grinder. And we can clearly see a taller peak and a tighter distribution for the higher quality grinders. Towards the left here are smaller particles and towards the right are larger particles. And we can see that the cheaper grinder is making more large particles and more fine particles and fewer of the target size.
So a classic poor distribution. Show me another thing.
So what we see here is the surface area distribution of the 3 different grinders. So this peak towards the right is our target coffee ground size. As we get towards this first peak, that's the contribution of surface area due to fines. And we see that the cheaper coffee grinder is making much more fines and fewer of the target particles again.
One other point, I do want to just talk about the Baratza just quickly.
Yeah.
It's doing okay.
Absolutely. I'm very impressed by the Baratza, and it's interesting to me that it's about halfway between on this scale, the really high quality grinder and the really cheap grinder.
If you're curious how that big grinder tastes, if you want to check out Cometeer, there's a link in the description down below. It's not an affiliate link, but you should probably treat it just like an affiliate link, just so you know. So now it's time for a speed test, because I feel like speed is a big deal. With any piece of equipment, the more efficient it is, the faster it goes, the better it must be, right? So we're going to grind with each of these 2 grinders 30 grams of coffee. And we're going to time it and see how fast they are. Let's do that now. "20 seconds. Not bad. Let's try the Baratza. All right. A little bit slower. So if you reverse engineer the maths, this will do, at this particular grind setting, about 90 grams a minute. This one, a little bit less, maybe like 75 grams a second. I'll do the actual maths and put it underneath me now, but that's around it. Let's compare that to something much, much, much more expensive. To do that, we can't just grind 30 grams of coffee. We need to grind a lot more. With a roller mill, it's impossible to grind that much and have any idea how long it took. We're going to need to grind 30 kilos of coffee and see how fast that thing is. So we're back on the production floor again because it's time for the speed test. I'm going to load the big fancy grinder with coffee. We're going to grind 30 kilos here. I'm going to load some coffee.
Seconds.
Thank you. Okay, so the roller mill, the fancy grinder, 30 kilos per minute, which is a lot more than 90 grams a minute. It's not like 1,000 times more, but it's close. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like in this particular case, you really get what you pay for in terms of productivity. Now, you'll have noticed that I was throwing a bag of coffee because I overheard something as we were talking that was kind of interesting. And that's the idea that with a roller mill, you can do something really cool. You can change the shape of that distribution curve, right? It's not just about moving the peak up or down. You can move other parts of the curve to shape the distribution of coffee any way you want. So as part of that speed test, we also had them very kindly agree to adjust the grinder very slightly. I don't know quite what they're doing. They're never going to tell me this fun stuff. Probably moving 1 or 2 of the rollers to change things. And then we get an outcome. Let's go and see what changed. So we've now got the two charts, the original grinds from the roller mill and then the tweaked kind of shape curve, right? Like, what's changed?
So we can see a few changes here. The first on this volume density graph is that the new curve here in green is much finer as a peak. So we're able to change that target size with a lot of precision. And then you can also see the shape on the tail is quite different, where there's a slight hump around this 50 micron size. So we're able to augment not only our target, but the rest of the distribution as well.
How does this look in the kind of other charts that show surface area?
So here, if we pull it up, we can see some interesting data on the fines for the two surface area curves. So what we can see is the old graph in blue and the new one in green, that as we saw before, the total peak of the target size is shifted finer to the left there. But in addition, there are fewer overall fines, which you can see from the smaller peak in that fine size class.
So you can kind of make one grinder act like a number of different grinders in a way. I think people assume that a grinder and a burr set produces a result, a distribution. And this sort of says, if you have enough toys, you can play with that and you have sort of freedom to detach your fines from your targets and play with each of those things. So what do we learn? What do we take away from all of this stuff? I think that the takeaway here is a beautiful expression of kind of diminishing returns. Spending $50 on a coffee grinder is probably better than buying a bunch of certain pre-grounds, but it's not great. But, and I'm not saying you have to spend $500, but by the time you spent $500, you've had such an incredible improvement in cup quality. And I would say it's kind of linear at that point, right? Spending $100 will be kind of twice as good as this. But above $500 for someone at home, it really is a world of diminishing returns. I think it's really cool how far you can go. And if you're interested in kind of pushing coffee in a certain place and getting the most out of it, I'm glad that technology exists. But you can sort of see it on a chart, you know, like the jump in price for 1,000 times more than this. Yeah, you can see what you get for your money. Now you might ask, at $500,000, is it worth it? Well, I think it is. If you're trying to do incredible brewing at mass scale, then yeah, it absolutely is worth it. Is it worth it for you to be saving your pennies and not buying a house and instead buying a grinder? Or maybe not. I have to say, I said at the start, this video has been on my list for years. It's been kind of like a bucket list video. I am totally satisfied by what we have learned and looked at and discovered today. I am pleased. It's kind of amazing just to see it laid out in graphs, in the cup. I think that's just been super cool. But now I want to hear from you. Was this interesting? Did you learn a bunch about how good coffee grinders can be at the very top end? Was that kind of revelatory to you? Is it what you expected them to do? It was definitely a surprise for me. Let me know down in the comments below. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.